I said as I did this series and as I get an opportunity to stretch out a little bit, y'all don't mind if I stretch out a little bit now. I'm here, I can just stretch out, take my time a little bit with this message. I want to make sure I tell you a little bit of my story in this journey called East Bay Church. I came for the first time in 1997 when I was pregnant with my daughter Nia. And that's how I keep time, because she'll be 26 this month. And yes, I know. People who've known her since she was little are like, wow. And I came and I heard the Declaration of Principles, and the first thing that struck me was this idea that truth could be taught in all religions. And that was something that I had believed for a long time, but I didn't think there would be any other place that believed it. I certainly didn't believe that there would be a church that said, you know, that did the Muslim call to prayer, that had Rebecca Kaplan running down the aisle talking about the Jewish holidays, had the Buddhist meditation, and the Christ consciousness. I was like, wow. For sure interested in that kind of oneness. But when it really got good to me is when I took a class. Because it's one thing to come and celebrate and have good music and good community. It's another thing to really get into this thing and see how it works. So I took the foundations class with Reverend E and Reverend Mwata, her son, and I walked into that class angry and brokenhearted. I had just separated from my partner. I see some nodding like I walked into it too, just that way, right? I walked in the foundations angry and brokenhearted. I had separated from my partner. I had grown up with my stepfather and dealt with some abuse and abandonment in that situation. I had been holding on to everything in my life was his fault. And between the two of them, I had a lot going on inside me. And Reverend E talked about forgiveness. And I was like, y'all asking a lot. I've been holding this for a long time. I'm not sure I'm really ready to let it go. But Reverend Mwata talked about forgiving the driver that killed his father. And how it set him free. And I was like, whoa. These people aren't playing. They're walking the talk. I want that kind of freedom that he talked about. So this is Freedom Summer, so I had to tell you that my anger at my father was just running my life. I heard somebody say in a meeting the other day, if it's hysterical, it's historical. Say that. If it's hysterical, it's historical. So anything that gets you super, super triggered, you might want to look at the first time you felt that way. Because it's likely to have been in your childhood, in your family. So I worked on it. Soon I was loosening my grip on my partner that had left and was like, okay, there's possibility for me in the world to still be happy and have love. I wrote a letter like we did in Foundation to my father, not to send it, but at least to just move that energy in my heart. But there was one thing that I was, I'm a rebel. I was like, I hear you. But I was one of those that always had my hand up. People eventually would roll their eyes like, oh, here she go. But Reverend E said, I don't know about the rest of y'all, but she getting something out of this. Because she came with her questions. She's wanting to know if this thing is going to work in her life. So I raised my hand and I said, well, what about slavery? Y'all want to do all this forgiveness and we're one with everybody without exception. And I was like, what about slavery? And Reverend E looked at me and she said, talk to me about something you know about. I'm not used to being checked like that. But she was like, you haven't been a slave. I mean, she was right, so I had to just take that check. Sometimes you got to learn how to take a check, amen? And so I want to talk to you today. Last week I talked a little bit about Dr. King's sermon, Birth of a New Nation. And I like that. I got inspired by it because I sort of feel like we're at this rebirth moment here at East Bay, and I wanted to hear what he said, what he lifted up, what he was noticing. And so when I got into the story of the sermon, as I said, it was about the independence of Ghana. You know, our church has a strong relationship with Ghana. Folks win and they win again, and individuals here have lived there, and, you know, Brother Tete is our brother with our family, and so we have this relationship. So I was like, ooh, it's about Ghana. And this was the transition of independence from being the Gold Coast, was the name, to Ghana, right? This was the transition from being under the rule of Europe to being under the rule of self, right? And Dr. King was so fascinated with the thing that would fuel his message and his life, which was nonviolence. And what's important about nonviolence is it requires us not to have a mindset of enemy, not to have a mindset of hate, not to have a mindset of fear. And so he was observing the way, and you will see this in other leaders. You'll see it in Gandhi, you'll see it in Mandela, you'll see it in testimonies of people who, in the midst of tyranny, oppression, genocide, right, decided to operate from a spiritual principle. Mandela was in the prison praying for people. Got out, and the first thing he talked about was forgiveness, right? And this was also true of Kwame Nkrumah and the birth of the nation of Ghana. So here's what Dr. King said. He was there for the whole proceedings where they turned over power. And he said, the Duchess of Kent walked in. The Duchess, who represented the Queen of England, no longer had authority now. She was just a passing visitor. The night before, she was the official leader and spokeswoman for the Queen, and therefore the power of the leadership and the throne of the Gold Coast. But now, you know how Dr. King preached something, but now it's Ghana. It's a new nation now, and she is just an official visitor like Dr. King and Ralph Bunche and Coretta Scott King and everybody else, because this is a new nation. Yes. Now, what does this have to do with us? We got a lot of folks coming back. Yeah. We have a lot of folks who we had some stuff with, right? We have a lot of folks in our lives, in our families, in our homes, at our jobs, that we have a story about. We have a story about the hurt that they've caused. We have a story of unforgiveness. And even when we do a little work around here, because you're going to hear me talk about forgiveness over and over and over and over again, because I know if we're going to talk about freedom, we're going to have to talk about forgiveness. But even when we do a little forgiveness work, we might be willing to let you out of jail and let you stay over there, right? Sometimes that's the best we can do. There are things that we need to get some support to forgive. I believe in therapy. I believe in other modalities of healing, and I think it's all right that we say we need support. But I want us to be clear what the goal is in front of us. The goal in front of us is not, I don't hate you anymore. Oh, it's quiet. You like, Reverend Dereca, that's about all I got. I'm working hard to get to I don't hate you anymore. But I want you to bring to mind that person that is hard to forgive. Because if you can't bring them in here where we're praying and celebrating the oneness of all people, there's nowhere you can let it go. I want you to bring it right here. This room is prayed up. Bring them here. And I want to tell you what Kwame Nkrumah did. He took power, let the Duchess go and the name of the Gold Coast go and let Ghana go. But they had a celebration later that night, and Kwame Nkrumah decided to dance with the Duchess of Kent. Woo! Dr. King was in awe. Here she was, the former leader, the tyranny, the oppressor, the man as the woman. You know how we do it. The one I can't stand, the one that caused all the pain. Not just for him, but for his whole nation. She represents the hate that is possible for a whole nation. She represents the idea of sin that we were taught, some of us. We don't teach sin here. Because when we say we're one, we're all one with God. We are all perfect children of God, and I'm going to tell you that if you try to make an exception for the person you were just thinking about, well then so are you judged for the things you have done, the secrets you hold. Judge not, lest ye be judged. So here they are, they're dancing. And this is what Dr. King said about it. He said, we must come to the point of seeing that our ultimate aim is to live with all men as brothers and sisters under God and not be their enemies. See, this is the kind of oneness we're talking about. So I just want you to, that same person that you brought to mind, I just want you to imagine that they're a child of God. Just imagine. I didn't say you had to believe yet. Just imagine. See, I didn't come to play. We're going to do the hard stuff. Because this is freedom. The path to freedom is letting go of the thing that ails you, that hurts you, that holds you back, that holds you down, that wakes you up in the night with a nightmare. The thing that has you by the hand, has you by the throat, clenches your heart. We have to be willing to let it go, and we have the power, the dominion to bring it right here and leave it. Yes. All you have to do is choose. And I'm not telling you it's simple, but I'm telling you it's beautiful. Let me tell you what Ernest Holmes said about it. This is in The Thing Called You, page 110. It is certain that you will have to love your fellow man if you wish to be happy. Y'all insert gender there. You know this is. Your union with God implies your union with everything that lives. Do not be afraid of this. Do not shun the thought of it. Divine union means union with everything. This does not mean that you love those who are closest to you any less. You merely love all humanity more. Think for a moment, see, this is where I got the idea. Think for a moment about the few upon whom you have lavished particular affection. So now I want you to bring to mind somebody that you really, really love, that is easy to love, that is good to love. It could be your child, it could be your pet, it could be your grandma, it could be somebody on TV, but who do you really love? I mean, you know, we love a lot of ways. Now, permit your imagination, Ernest Holmes says, to include more people in that. Say to yourself, what would it be like if these few whom I love so much were multiplied so that finally everyone I meet should arouse in me the same deep affection? So you got that one? Your little one, your best friend, you got that one? What if You expected to love everyone like that. Everybody you meet. You know that smile you get for somebody? We were talking about my brother Reggie Bass yesterday, and that smile. Woo, that smile. There was never a time where you didn't get that smile. What if there was something in him that said, I see you and I see something good and amazing that brings me joy. It did not matter who you were, what your story was, what your history was. He didn't need to know that. This is what we can choose to imagine if we want, that everyone is just as good and wonderful as that one that's easy for you to love. Holmes says, dare to lose your small affection. Ooh, I like that. Small affection. You got a tight circle. I have a friend who says, I don't use the word love. That's only for my family. And I think, ooh, you're missing out. You're missing out. I tell him, I said, like I signed something to him. I said, like Dereca, right? You're missing out with that fear of giving love. You're missing out. Give it freely. I'm not talking about, I'm not talking about free love. I'm talking about agape love. I'm talking about just giving people the benefit of the doubt that when you see them right off top, as my brother would say, off rip, I'm imagining you as God. That's what I'm imagining when I meet you, when I see you. And then you can go ahead, if you're feeling real good, and extend that to the people you want to forgive. This was so good to me. I got more to say about Ernest Holmes here. I love it. I'm really just back in my element where it's like Holmes and I are just hanging out. He said, learn to be at home in the universe. No more loneliness, no more sense of isolation. Who feels isolated sometimes? Feels a little lonely sometimes, right? Here's the key. See God in everyone. The same God with a different face. The same animating principle with a different form. The same divine presence clothed in individual expression. Let me tell you what he's talking about. God shows up in a lot of different ways. In a lot of different people, in a lot of different situations, and you go, ooh, I see you, because I'm looking for God. I'm looking for God in everyone. I'm making up a story. Y'all, some of you know I have driving opportunities for growth. I'm working on it. But one of the things somebody told me, people who've been in my car are laughing harder. One of the things somebody told me is make up a story. Make up a story about the person who cut you off or the person who's driving too slow or too fast. Just make up a story about why. Because it will help you. Whenever somebody is driving too slow, I see my grandma. And I don't want nobody honking at her, so I'm not honking at nobody. I want you to send my grandma good thoughts, so I'm sending your grandma good thoughts. That's what I make up, right? Whenever somebody is zigzagging and doing the most, I make up a story of who's at the hospital needing their support. What child is at home that just had, I make up a story and it helps. Now, I haven't perfected this making up a story, but I am working on it. I am working on it. Because again, forgiveness, this idea of oneness, it's not for the other person. This person in the car don't know you, don't care, is on their own trajectory. It's for you. Because all that honking is making your day suck. Not their day. That's what you don't want. And there is a payoff. If you practice this, oneness and forgiveness, I am you, you are me, there before the grace of God go I. If you practice it, here's what Holmes says is the payoff. There is a fountain of life from which if a man drink, he shall never thirst again. Your search is after this fountain that you may be immersed in it. You cannot plunge into the waters of real life unless you take everyone else in with you. Who do you have to take? Everyone else. Ooh. The universe is one system, not two political parties. Uh-oh. I mean, you have to take everyone else with you. So you've got to go to that place in your mind where you feel unforgiveness. I have had the opportunity to practice this over and over and over again. If you know my story, you know that when I became a minister, you have to do panels. And I sat outside my panels praying for R. Kelly. Because that was where the unforgiveness was in my heart. I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't get there. Reverend E, in the midst of all that I was doing in the activism for Oscar Grant, came in here and said we have to pray for Messerly. Yeah. Ooh, that was hard. But that's the reality of oneness, because if you can pray for them, then the people in your life are no problem. Wherever your consciousness is holding somebody in prison, this is the path to your freedom, is letting them go. I had a practitioner session yesterday because there was somebody I was holding on to. And what happens is you can do it on your own, great. But if you can't, get help. Ask somebody who loves them to talk to you about it. I had somebody do that for me last week, didn't I? Right? Had somebody say, well, tell me what you love about this person I really don't get. I'm just going to say I don't get. Right? And she went to talking about how she feels so good being in her presence and how supportive she was. And I was like, thank you so much for sharing that with me, because it helped me shift. That this person who I don't get is so good to this person that I love, it helped me shift. And of course, let me tell you what happened. When I shifted with that person, they shifted with me. Automatic. It's automatic. It works like that. Because this is what we teach. Change your thinking, change your life. This stuff really works. I went to a practitioner and said, I got this thing. She gave me activities to do. She prayed with me. She recorded the prayer. Like, in case you forget, listen to this again. Right? Because I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's worth it. Yes. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying you want to be free of it. You really do. So whatever works. Whether it's therapy, it's prayer, take the classes, watch some good, positive videos on YouTube. I don't know what your thing is, but get about that business. Because this is the work we are about. So I had an aha moment. Y'all, I love the aha moments. Because forgiveness, the deepest root of it, is often forgiving ourselves. Yes, yes. That's often the deepest root. So I've been holding myself hostage a long time. A long time, maybe as far back as I can remember, because I had this idea that was actually taught to me of not being enough. And it didn't matter, you look at other people and you think, oh, they're so successful and they're so well loved and they're so well liked. That is no indicator, let me tell you. Ask me how I know. That people aren't so hard on themselves. We're so hard on ourselves. And sometimes we take this religious science thing and we turn it upside down and backwards and say, well, it's my fault. I must not be thinking right. I must not be praying right. I must not be doing it right. There's something wrong with me because my life hasn't changed the way it should have. It hasn't changed like her life has changed. It hasn't changed like their life has changed. I see them doing good. How come I'm not doing good? That's what we do with this tool. You can abuse any consciousness. You can abuse any principle, right? So don't beat yourself with it. So I talk to God, and often I journal, as these conversations are going on. Thank you, Reverend Deborah, for letting it be something we could all be out in public with. So I talked to God, and I had this aha moment that I'm going to read to you from my journal. You know, if I stretch out, we're going to get real personal in here. You know, do you know that they teach ministers not to talk about yourself from the pulpit? Yeah, they do. There's this whole thing about don't come and bleed on the pulpit. You shouldn't be talking about talk about what you've already healed. And I was like, see, that's what I'm talking about. When I talk about closing the gap between the pews and the pulpit, right? It's about saying, I'm working it just like you're working it. Let's work it together. We are one. And I just, God told me to share this with y'all anyway, so I'm learning to be obedient. That's how I got this pulpit. I was like, all right, okay. So this is the message. What if I don't lack anything? What if I already am everything I aspire to be? What if I am incredibly disciplined and obedient and I just don't know it? I don't know if anybody else struggles with those too, but what if this whole time the issue has been that I have been trying to be perfect the way I was raised to be? And that I keep seeking places to help me cope with my feelings of imperfection. But that those feelings are actually the only problem. What if? Part of being human is that you will be disappointed in yourself, that even this moment of realization that you are having right now, which is 100% accurate, will take time to integrate into your thinking. But the Holmes that you are reading right now is reminding you that it doesn't have to take time because you are unwell or defective or disobedient. I don't know if any of you all struggle with those things, but this is just me. It only takes as much time as it takes you to shift your thinking. That's it. You want to know how long it takes? That's how long it takes. So the stinking thinking about yourself is the problem. And what you can feel in Holmes is the immediacy of the opportunity. What am I saying? I'm saying that Holmes says there's no time and space in God. This teaching says you can have this change right now to the degree that you can accept the idea that you and God are one. That everything that you are, you can count as part of the journey. You can count as part of the opportunity. You can count it all as good, no matter what it looks like. Didn't I just tell you to forgive that person over there? Well, then you too surely can be forgiven for whatever gap you think there is between divinity and yourself. There's no gap. There's no lack. There's no limitation. Listen, God told me to give it to you. Just get, okay, so I said, okay, God, this is me talking now. So now what? God says, celebrate. Really? I'm reading you for real. It says, really? Yes. Celebrate that you are already free, already whole, perfect, and complete, that there is not and never will be anything else you have to become to be good, perfect, enough. Oh, that one right there. Lovable, worthy. Nothing that you have to do. The start is the finish. It's a circle, not a line. What do I mean? It's not a destination that you're going to get to when I work hard enough, when I pray long enough, when I'm smart enough, when I'm pretty enough, then I'm going to have. Then I'm going to have a partner, a good job, money. Then I'm going to have what I need. That's not what it says. It's a circle. And every single point in it, no matter what is happening in your life, you and God are one. You know, y'all know the little footprints thing. God, where were you? I was carrying you. That's where I was. It's a circle, not a line, and all of it is useful to support you in being human. Because if you were perfect, you didn't need to come here and have this human experience. You could have just kept on being God in the non-body realm, in the spiritual realm, because you are a spirit. You know that. It's not that your spirit is in your body is in your spirit. You are a spiritual being, and this is the form you took. God decided, I want to come in a whole bunch of different forms, and you are just one of those. The perfect individuation of God in the flesh. Whatever God wants to do on this planet, it's got to do it through life. So it keeps creating more and more opportunities for it to express itself. You are an opportunity for God to express itself. The express lane to that is to know who you are. The express lane to that is to know who you are. So God is saying to me, in being human, all of this is useful to support you in being human, but none of it, I'm talking about your life now, I'm talking about the trials and tribulations, the up and down, none of it is necessary to realize that you are divine right now. Life doesn't have to be perfect to be wonderful. And here's what it says. I got so excited, I wrote it in my journal. Yes, girl. I just want to tell you, God talks to me in my own voice. This right here, dog, I swear that's what it says. This right here, dog, this testimony is the rock on which your ministry will be built. This is it. Every week I'm going to say it in a different way. God and I are one. If that's true for me, it's true for you, because we are one. I'm going to tell you all the different ways God has revealed this. God has worked something out by just reminding me this one principle. God is all there is. There's nothing else. And if that's still kind of uncomfortable for you, take some classes. Because that's where you get to ask your questions. Well, what about slavery? Right? You get to ask those questions. So I want to invite you to get off the sidelines and get into this Freedom Summer thing that we are doing here. I'm going to invite you to come to church or watch church every week. This is a series, and we're going to take it little by little and get into all these different aspects of freedom. I'm going to invite you to share this with someone who you think could benefit. Because when you have somebody else to talk about it with, that actually is when it gets good. It gets you get to tenderize it a little bit. You're like, you know what she said in service, I was thinking about it. And what you think about that? Right? Because this is yours to do. God gave me this, not for me. Well, for some of this is for me. Y'all do what you want. But it's for us. Right? People come up to you after service and they say, oh, you were talking to me today. That's intentional. That's the whole point of church, right? So when you share it with someone, give them the little link, and we're getting our little online presence together. We're going to have a little version where it's just 20 minutes of the talk, or, all of that. We're getting it together. But share it with someone, because as I say all the time, you may be the only spiritual text they ever read. This is how we communicate in the information age. We share. I want you to get involved with what we're doing in this community. If you're online, on the website, EBCRS.org, there's something called community programs, right? And you can go there and click on it and fill out a little form saying you want to get involved. I want to hear things that would excite you about getting involved. On July 23rd, we're going to have a community conversation after service. Take the classes. I'm going to talk more about those during the announcements. I'm going to start teaching a class, Change Your Thinking, Change Your Life, at later in this month. I want to just say one more thing before we close. I talk about God a lot in a lot of different ways. I was raised in a church where we pray, and we pray to God. But I want you to understand how we do things here is we're not praying to a person in the sky. We're talking about a force. We're talking about a force for good. We're talking about an energy like love, like electricity. I don't care, as you will hear me say over and over, what you call it. Whatever path, when I told you at the beginning, what attracted me to this philosophy is wherever truth is taught, right? So if that's the EBCRS religion for you, do that, right? If it's Jesus is your Lord and Savior, do that. But what we're talking about here is that there is an energy that runs through all of these things that's just out there in a tree in nature. There's an energy in the breath of an elder or a child. There's something that is alive that is calling to you. When you listen for it, you'll hear it. Yes. Right in your body, right in your breath. You'll have this moment they call the quickening. So when I'm talking about God, I'm talking about all of that, right? So when I say give it to God, I'm saying trust in that flow. Last week we talked about flow, that double Dutch thing. There is something that's happening that is good. I want to be in that. Whether it is the good smell outside, whether it is the good love of someone who loves, whatever the good is, that's what I'm talking about. And I hope that this community will be a place where you can feel that. And I pray, I intend, I know that we will do the work together to get out of the way of anything that looks like it's blocking that. Yeah. Are you ready for your change? Yes. Who's ready for your change? Yes. Let's do that. Let's be in the business as we go into prayer of getting ready for our change.